Hello, everybody, and welcome to our conversation on religion and American life. You're in the meeting house, and I'm your host, Dwight A. Moody, coming to you from our studios just outside of Greenville, South Carolina. My guest today, the Reverend Dr. George Mason, coming to us from his study in Dallas, Texas. Dr. Mason just retired after 33 years as pastor of the influential Wilshire Baptist Church there in Dallas, Texas. But while there, he launched a few years ago, 5 years ago now, a media initiative called Faith Commons. We're going to talk to him about that, but we're going to begin by asking him about his new book, The Word Made Fresh. Welcome to the meeting house, George.
Thank you so much, Dwight. It's great to be with you.
I honor you as a lifelong pastor, near and dear to my heart. I'm a pastor, as you know, of a micro church up in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and I love it a great deal.
I know the church and the people. Yes, actually. That's great.
You are a pastor, a scholar, a community activist, and an author. You have a book coming out in just a couple of weeks. Right. Tell us about it.
Yes, it is called The Word Made Fresh, and the subtitle is Preaching God's Love for Everybody. 2 words, everybody.
Why 2 words?
Well,
everybody.
Everybody is a way of gesturing toward the particularity of every individual. And the idea that spirituality is bodily. It is not something just ephemeral, but it has to do with our life in the body. And the fact that there are many different kinds of bodies, we're becoming more and more aware of the importance of honoring the body and individuals in terms of their own place in society, how they understand themselves, and that sort of thing. So spirituality, as you know, faith can become something otherworldly, disconnected from flesh and blood experience. And so this is really directed toward recognizing that people have particular experiences in the world based upon who they are in terms of their gender, their ethnicity, their socioeconomic status, their sexual orientation, their gender identity, these sorts of things. And that we want this message of God's love to apply to everybody, not in general, but in particular.
I think about, I'm listening in my head, all of the current moral and ethical issues in the world today that have a bodily dynamic, from hunger and war and peace to all the gender issues, to gun violence, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, to the whole issue of the transgender identity, which I have written about, have done a show on. I know this is part of your concern as well.
It really is. And so this book is actually a compilation of 80 sermons that I preached over the course of 33 years. There were 1,400 of them, so 80 have been selected. And they're broken down, Dwight, into 12 different areas or chapters that have to do with things like social justice and peacemaking and ecumenism and interfaith activity and theology and the mission of the church and all sorts of things like that. So they also follow the lectionary, generally speaking. So for those of us who preach from the lectionary, this could be a sermon resource. And there's a bonus that about half of these sermons have a QR code in the book that you can actually go straight to the original YouTube preached sermon, and you can see it and listen to it as well. So
Is the book laid out according to the Christian calendar, beginning with Advent?
It's thematic. It's thematic, but each sermon is identified according to its lectionary day. So it's not difficult to go to the scriptural index, for instance, in the back and match it up, and then you can see about that. Mm-hmm.
The title of the book is The Word Made Fresh. Always a challenge to preachers, isn't it, George?
It is, and it can be a kind of trite phrase, of course, but it's also naturally a way of playing off of the idea of the Word made flesh. Mm-hmm. This being, from a Christian perspective, what the eternal Word of God is made flesh in Jesus of Nazareth, and therefore lives and dwells among us. So it goes back to the everybody idea, the bodily idea. Our faith is a very this worldly matter, and yet every time we preach, we are representing.
We are
representing and representing this Word made flesh again and again and again. So each time it should be a Word made fresh.
So what is the publication date?
It is, I believe, the 28th of June. It's available on Amazon for pre-order at this time. So
28th of June, coming out next month.
Right.
Well, in the middle of all this sermonizing, 5 years ago, you launched a media initiative about religion and American life, which is the tagline for the Meeting House. You call it Faith Commons.
Yes.
I want to know what prompted you to do this.
Well, let's go back to the fact that I had retired from the senior pastor role. And lots of people counseled me, I'm sure they have you through the years, about how you come up against that time of your life when you're going to pass the baton, and then what do you do next? And many people said to me, you should have something to go to, not just something to go from. And you ought to get started before you finish.
Absolutely.
So I decided, okay, that's what I'm going to do, and started Faith Commons. But it also is indicative of a sense of direction that my ministry was taking through the years. From being Baptist particular, you might say, and I always was and will be, because you and I both share a sense of the singular contribution of our Baptist stream of history that is often distorted today, but that we felt obligated to and privileged to keep alive during our period of influence in pulpits and churches. That being about religious liberty, especially about the freedom of the conscience before God, about a kind of liberating message to all. And so I think that's something underappreciated about us Baptists.
Well, of course, what you just articulated as Baptist identity would surprise a lot of people.
That's
because
my point. Yeah,
the Baptist brand has a very different look and feel on the national landscape these days. Sometimes we're tempted to ditch the word Baptist because of all the connotations that go with it.
And there's good reason for us to feel that way, but people like you and me, we also know that history and think it's worth reminding people that there's still a contribution to be made about that. And I believe that the founders of our country, who finally gave us a Constitution and a Bill of Rights, really drew from the Baptist well, and they wanted a true religious liberty for all and a kind of robust religious pluralism that they did not live to see really themselves, but we are experiencing today. And yet there is such a backlash to that in terms of Christian nationalism today, that I wanted Faith Commons to be a way of saying, look, we need a common life together. Think of a commons on a campus of a school, a college, a grassed area where people can come to the commons and we can say to them, you don't have to leave your faith behind when you come to offer your views and to discuss and dialogue and debate. Bring your faith with you, whatever that faith may be, even no faith. And we will live together in the commons and we'll work toward the common good. So Faith Commons is committed to a religious pluralism that honors all these other religions in the United States and, of course, globally as well. And it seeks to listen as much as to talk, to learn as much as to teach. And so we think this is an important way of going about this project of Americana that we have never fully lived up to.
Reminds me of a conversation I had just a few years ago by the host of a podcast broadcast. She was interested in apologetics nationally, a Jude 3 project it's called. And she asked me what was the chief thing that we needed to do today to be effective in our apologetic ministry. And I said to her, listen. We need to learn how to listen.
Yeah.
I think it kind of surprised her, but I do agree with you that learning to listen to people,
right,
where they're coming from and giving them space to speak is part of this media initiative that you and I have, you in Dallas, Texas, and me over here in South Carolina. If people want to listen to what you're doing or read what you're doing, tell them how to do that.
Right. So Faith Commons has a website, faithcommons.org, and you can actually subscribe to our monthly newsletter. It's an email newsletter. There's no charge for it. You can wander through our website and get lots of information, read what we're up to. And, one of the programs we have, Dwight, through Faith Commons is a podcast that I do titled Good God, Conversations About
That's
Faith.
Great. That's a great title.
Yeah,
Good God.
And from the beginning, what I wanted to do was to emphasize both sides of that. That is to say, yes, we believe in a good God, but we also believe in the good. And we're pursuing the good. And we want to ask people who are doing the common good about their faith position. What drives them? What motivates them to do work for the common good? So a lot of those conversations are oriented in that way. And there's about 150 of them, podcasts on the website. So people can subscribe to that for free also, at Apple Podcasts or on YouTube. And it's both audio and video, just like yours.
Well, the phrase good God has a slang meaning.
That's right.
Good God, what's going on around here? That type of thing.
That's the double entendre is intentional. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So tell me, you've got this is an ecumenical initiative. Who's in on it with you?
It's actually an interfaith, not ecumenical.
Right.
So ecumenical in the sense that
explain the difference between ecumenical and interfaith.
Right. So ecumenical tends to be a language we use about bringing together Christian denominations toward unity and working together. And so it does represent that, but it is not specifically a Christian organization. We started out from the beginning to say, no, we're an interfaith organization. A lot of people these days, Dwight, are using the term multi-faith as a way, I think, of trying to honor the uniqueness of each of these different faith traditions. I actually use the word interfaith instead for this reason. And that is, I think while we don't want to force people to change by being in our relationship with one another, we want them to bring their full selves, and we want to respect their traditions entirely. Nonetheless, I think when we are in relationship, when we are working together, listening to each other, really in relationship, we will change. We will see in others things that we missed in our own tradition, and we will rethink some things. I really believe that that this is a gift of God, and that the presence of other religions and people of sincere faith around us who do not share our theology, but who have sincere faith in the God who made us all, have something to teach us. And I know that my own Christian experience is different because of my relationship, say, for example, with my primary partner in this work, Rabbi Nancy Kasten, and my good friend, Imam Omar Solomon, who has been a great partner and friend through this enterprise as well. But Nancy's theological tradition of Reform Judaism and my Baptist tradition have had a wonderful synergy. And I don't know what she would say about her own experience of changing her mind or heart about certain things, but I can certainly tell you mine has.
You know, early in my ministry, fresh out of college, I went to Israel and lived a year in Jerusalem, that great city of intersection of not only the Abrahamic religions, as we call them, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and all the variations of those three, but many other people, including a great deal of unbelief and secularism, very much alive in Jerusalem. It shaped me in a very powerful way coming out of my rather provincial Baptist roots. So I agree with you. I think this is what you're trying to do with Faith Commons. It's what we're trying to do here in the Meeting House. I've read a bunch of stuff, including Rabbi Nancy's essay on gun violence. Gosh, Texas has had its share over the last couple of years. How do you deal with it? I've read her essay. How do you deal with it, trying to lead a conversation from a faith-based perspective in a state where religion covers up so much of or animates so much of public policy in a very different way?
Right. So I think we all know that religion can be an agent of hate or love, of discord or peace, and as such, we experience both of those things, and it's truly tragic. And when it is fueling people's rage and underscoring their prejudices, it is really more of an ideology than a theology, which we have seen in this country for so long, because you know, we come from a Baptist tradition that in the South figured out a way to read the Bible to support the institution of slavery.
We did.
And we have to be honest about that history and recognize that it was so. And today, some of us are willing to repent of that and to say that we need to be at work to repair that history because it was harmful to human beings. I really believe that if your religion is not supportive of full human rights, universal dignity, there's something wrong with your religion. And so the Christian faith was founded upon this idea of there being neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male and female. This idea that we are all one in the eyes of God through Jesus Christ. This
George, let me just, I want to add an exclamation point to what you've been talking about. Personally, as I begin to grapple with how my religion, our religion, the Baptist of the South, supported and promoted and defended to the death slavery, I ask myself, how could my religion do this? How could it be so distorted? And this caused me to search deeply and to question widely that which had been so formative in my own life, and I'm sure in yours as well. It wasn't theological issues, it wasn't ecclesial issues, it was this social, cultural issue of slavery that made me examine my own heart as well as my own tradition. And I appreciate you bringing this up.
Peter Drucker, the great nonprofit business professional, he said famously that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, culture, unfortunately, eats theology for breakfast too.
It does.
And I think you bring up the matter of gun violence, and I think this is what we're dealing with here. And so much of the divisions in our country are not about a theological difference in worldview that come out of our religious tradition as much as they are culture seeking a theology that will support it. And so I think in this country, we are dealing with the loss of obviously white Protestants in America from Northern Europe were sort of the original immigrants, right? And the first big question that the country had to deal with after the fact that there were Native Americans here that we, did not treat properly, and that we had brought enslaved persons from Africa. But then from a voluntary immigration standpoint, the first big thing was, what about these Irish Catholics and Italian Catholics who are coming over? They actually look sort of like us, but they're not us because they're Catholic. Can they be good Americans? Can we welcome them? Now, I'm from the Northeast. I'm from New York. And so, Italians in New York, especially, some Irish, but mostly in Boston, this was a big conflict that was going on in that wave of immigration. Can we accept Catholics as being fully American? And this is after the fact that we have a First Amendment to the Constitution. It should not surprise us then that the question of people immigrating from the southern border and from all over the globe, whether people of Hispanic descent or of Muslim religions from other places, should threaten the sense of stability of a culture that is still by default white Christian. We are still trying to come to grips with our ideals versus the feeling of reality on the ground. And in that tension, what we find is fear that is grabbing us. How do we respond to that fear? Well, one of the ways we do is we turn to our faith and we learn that we can welcome the stranger, and we can create a kind of world that God has given us a hint of and called us to. Or we can say, I need a gun to protect myself and my own against these people. I mean, the main thing you hear from gun owners is the reason they buy it is for protection. And my question is, from whom? They never say from whom. But what we know, of course, is most of the time it's from people who don't look like me, from people who want to take something from me, rather than people who don't look like me, who have something to offer, who want to live with us and build the kind of country where we truly live up to these ideals. This is, I think, what we've got to challenge in this gun culture.
You certainly must feel like a minority voice in your culture down there in Texas. How does that feel?
Well, sometimes terribly discouraging. Right now, as the Texas legislature is winding down, and some of the most horrible bills are being passed and written into law that are dividing us against each other and denying full human rights and dignity to people, and even access to the ballot box, and democracy itself being threatened. I'm not an apocalyptic person by nature, but I'm watching all of these things being chipped away at in the name of morality and freedom, which is really not for everybody. It's for a group. And so now, of course, one of the blessings, Dwight, is that there are people like you, even not in Texas, but that we work with, my partner, Nancy Kasten, and so many others in Faith Commons, who gather together and who work together and lobby and work in Dallas to promote the kind of vision of a city, county, state, and nation that we believe is part of God's dream for the world.
You've got a great challenge. You're doing a great work, George. I want to thank you for being my guest in the Meeting House today. I hope we can do this again. I hope we can collaborate on some more things as we seek a common ministry in the Faith Commons, what I call the Meeting House, both of them trying to evoke common space where at the intersection of faith and community good happens. God bless you. Thank you very much. I'll be back in touch.
Thanks for everything, Dwight.
Thank you to everybody for joining our conversation today. My guest has been the Reverend Dr. George Mason, the founder of a ministry very much like the Meeting House. He's out in Dallas, Texas. He calls it Faith Commons. I'm Dwight A. Moody in the Meeting House. Visit our website at themeetinghouse.net. Read all the commentaries. If you would like to subscribe to our newsletter, you can do that. It also is free, goes out every Wednesday evening. If you would like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can do that as well. Thank you very much. Dwight Moody from the Meeting House. Have a nice day.